Hello everyone. Today I'll be speaking about Mark Kushner's TED Talk, Why the Buildings of the Future Will Be Shaped by You. He begins by telling a personal story about how when he was a child he would have to make a walk from his bathroom to his bedroom after showering, and he would have to walk through the living room where his entire family would be, and how this made him uncomfortable. He sets the tone from the beginning, very personally, connecting to his audience with experience that many others might have felt similarly or in a different way. He wants to connect with them because this leads him into his larger point, which is that about architecture is not about the structure or the way the building looks. It's rather the emotions that are felt by it, by the consumer of the space. He backs this by stating that about 90% of our lives are spent indoors. In his first point, he wants to speak about the disconnect between architects and the general public. Throughout history, the general public like to feel symbolic connections, the emotional connection that he felt with that building, with his home. While it was hatred, people want to feel that same warmth, that same connection with public spaces. That being Mediterranean homes, or for example, that government buildings should be a classical style with Greek columns, because the Greek invented democracy in that sense. So it's symbolic traditions that people look to feel comfortable and that it makes sense. However, architects throughout history have wanted to pursue innovation and new techniques, new construction styles. However, those have often made people feel more alienated and colder in those spaces. So throughout history, he explains how this is almost all compiled into one simple metaphor of a pendulum, where on one side you have this innovation and this pursuit for new things, while on the other side you have this traditional, symbolic, emotional connection that people wanted. Now, in the past, there was a larger disconnect between architects and the public, in the sense that there was no real connection. They were not speaking. So architects would try and pursue new designs, new innovation, so the pendulum's on this side, and then over time people would feel alienated. They say buildings are ugly, we want to go back to the old styles, and the pendulum gradually would shift back to the other side. However, during this time, being that there was no connection between social media, he explains how there was this feedback loop. By the time that a building had been designed and it was trending and it had been built, it had been so long that the trends might have either changed by then, or it was just elongating what theoretically should have already been switching. Now this brings him to his next point, where he starts by showing us an example, striking images, and explaining the significance that the Guggenheim in Bilbao by Frank Gehry had. He explains how this was the first building of its kind that was able to appeal to both crowds, to architects and the general public. And in that moment, everyone wanted a Bilbao moment. They all wanted their own tourism, and that was the future. This, piled with the growth in social media, allowed people to share buildings more quickly, to share their opinions more quickly, the general public that being, and architects were allowed to learn from it and almost work hand in hand. He explains this in a personal note as well. He speaks about his firm and how one of the projects was very well connected with the public, so much so that for 2 years before the building was actually built, people were already excited and they already had formed this physical connection to it, even though I had no emotional connection in terms of Greeks or anything of that sort. This shows the future of architecture. He then switches his tone to a more unifying tone, where he wants everyone in the crowd, architects, the public, whoever's there, to feel like they are one now and they're working together. He starts at the beginning, he began the speech by explaining how architects and the public were very different, polar opposites. But by the end, he's almost brought them back together. He's unified them into one, where he speaks about we are the future. And I think it leaves the crowd with a very happy ending. I think it's very conclusive, and it's shaping to show what the future can be and should be. Thank you.